Today's paper is the human consumption of microplastics.
You are going to mute the sound from your side. 화면 보시죠.
다른 거.
공유.
이게 아니에요.
그 파일을 바꿔야지. 우리 예스씨.
뭐네요?
그래요?
좀 땡겨가지고, 던치.
Can you see the paper?
주민 뭐.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
모두 와서 다 껐다 그러잖아.
Okay. The title of the paper is Human Consumption of Microplastics. It's not long and not so complicated, but it has many impressions on me. I read through the abstract and see figure and table and go through the contents. Abstract: microplastics are ubiquitous across ecosystems, yet the exposure risk to humans is unresolved. Focus on the American diet, we evaluated the number of microplastic particles in commonly consumed food in relation to their recommended daily intake. The potential for microplastic inhalation and how the source of drinking water may affect microplastic consumption were also explored. Our analysis used 402 data points from 26 studies, which represents over 3,600 processed samples. Evaluating approximately 15% of Americans' caloric intake, we estimate that annual microplastic consumption ranges from 39,000 to 52,000 particles, depending on age and sex. These estimates increased to 74,000 and 121,000 when inhalation is considered. Additionally, individuals who met their recommended water intake through only bottled sources may be ingesting an additional 90,000 microplastics annually, compared to 4,000 microplastics for those who consume only tap water. These estimates are subject to a large amount of variation. However, given methodological and data limitations, these values are likely underestimates. The main focus of this paper, they evaluated their annual intake of microplastics. It means particle per year, per person. And they evaluated seafood, air, and water, beer. And they separated people of those who drinking water through not only from bottled water and tap water. And first, they evaluated daily annual intake from food, and they added evaluation from inhalation. So they suggested this figure, and totally they suggested this figure. And they mentioned this evaluation is likely underestimated because they considered just 15% of caloric intake. That means it's underestimated. I go to the figure and tables. This figure shows consumed annually, microplastics consumed annually, and microplastics inhaled annually. This suggests this figure by age and sex. Female child is the lowest and male adult is the largest. Again, inhalation microplastics, the lowest value showed from female child, second male child, and female adults and male adults. You can see this figure. I already read this number in the abstract. 39,000 and this amount, 59 maybe. And American people inhaled microplastics for this amount. And if we add this number and this number, we can understand the intake microplastics is plus this amount for male, female child. Again, we can do for other groups. So they suggested this table 2 is same thing. Annually, male children is number, and the male adults is the highest, and the female children is the lowest, and female adults. And this is the mean and standard deviation of microplastic concentration within each source of ingested microplastic particle. This microplastic particle per day, male adults, female adults, and male child and female child. This is the particle number, and we can see for all groups, air inhalation intake is the highest. And the difference from this figure and this figure, the highest is the same, and the order are very similar. But for adults and children, we can see a little difference from this. For male, seafood is the second largest, but here the bottled water for female child, bottled water is the second. But male child, seafood is the second. And we can look through this order. Bottled water, sugar, tap water, alcohol, and salt and honey. And for children, alcohol is not evaluated. And for the type of microplastics, we can see fiber is the highest proportion, and the second for almost all sources, fragments are the second. But this is a little different. And for sugar and honey, just fibers and fragments are found. And we shouldn't be confused. This is just a percent, not the concentration or intake value. This is the percent because it's 50%, and others proportion is high, a little high compared with alcohol and air. I mean in the water, so it looks like a smaller, of course, smaller percent, but it's not. I mean, it's not concentration. And they evaluated bottled water and tap water. If American drink water through only bottled water, microplastic intake is very high compared with the tap water and average. Average means 15%, 17% from tap water and 83%. We can see the figure in the contents. I don't remember well. Maybe 17% from tap water, 83% from bottled water. That means current. And if they drink water just from bottled water, daily consumption is high, more than 200 particles. But tap water very low compared with this. They mentioned 22 times difference from this figure and this figure. So we should drink tap water if we visit America. That's all. And we have another.
Supplementary.
Okay. 이거 다시 공유해야 되는 거죠?
아니,
Can you see the supplementary material?
뭐예요? 화면에 들어있어요.
We have several figures on the supplementary material. This is the polymer identification method for this sources of food. This paper is from reviewed paper. They reviewed many papers. So in the paper, microplastics are detected from this method. FTIR, ICP-MES, and Raman spectroscopy. None maybe means count. Actually, I did not
Not
understand.
identified.
Not using.
Not using this one, maybe. Because they suggested this number. So they count by naked eye. I don't understand. I should check the paper, but I didn't. I'm sorry, but maybe
Microscope.
just microscope. Anyway, for seafood in the paper, they detected microplastics through FTIR, and this one none. Or for each sources is C. A means seafood, and B means honey, salt, sugar, and C means beer and water. And is notable for none means maybe naked eye. Beer is very high on this paper, but others is low like this. And this is the dye method, rose Bengal stain. I just googled. And this is the consumption item. And in the paper, they found this concentration. Microplastic particle per gram for food, and for liquid, a particle per liter, and inhalation through the air is particles per cubic meter. First section for seafood. We can see it showed this amount of concentration. This is 1 decimal digit, and salt is lower, much lower than seafood, and honey much lower than seafood. And here alcohol is very high. Be careful. And water is very high too, so we shouldn't drink bottled water. We shouldn't buy this bottle. It's very high. It's the same unit particle per liter. So tap water is much lower than bottled water. I thought about these numbers. Maybe filtration system. They filter this water in the municipal treatment system.
In German?
I mean, yes, this country it is from people, so the German people evaluated this tap water is lower. So I just thought about. It's not sure, but
Just imagine what's the reason.
it's the case. Filtration system filter the microplastics.
Some processes to filter
And for bottled water, we
For
should
water.
keep the mineral, so we cannot filter very well. I heard.
And they usually using plastic bottle.
bottles. And
Yeah,
caps.
I thought about that. Particles from plastic bottle.
I guess.
Probably
Then we
some kind of
shouldn't eat many kinds of food because I don't think so.
Go ahead, please.
In normal
Go
condition,
ahead,
you shouldn't lick. And this is also the same thing. This is microplastic particle, and suggested this figure from this paper, the reviewed papers I mentioned, and respective unit. It means total microplastic particle for each consumption item group. So we can compare this. If is high, alcohol is very high, and bottled is much higher, and tap water lower, and air is high too. But air is different unit. It's different, but this is they use the same unit, and here is the same unit. So we should compare the three things altogether and these things altogether. That's all the supplement. And so I showed this paper and left. I summed up the abstract of this paper. I'll tell you this abstract of my own. Introduction, they mentioned microplastics are integrated into widely consumed food items like seafood, and the particles less than 130 micrometer in diameter have potential to translocate into human tissues. And they trigger many bad reactions. I mean, our body react these particles, microplastic particles. But the evaluation of intake of microplastics are not estimated well. So they gathered papers about food consumption, drinking water and beer, and they gathered data from data for microplastic intake inhalation through the air. So they gathered 402 data points from 26 studies. It represents 3,600 samples. And the evaluation includes seafood, sugar, salt, honey, alcohol, tap, and bottled water. And the data analysis was performed according to age and sex. And inhalation was included too. And they calculated the daily intake or annual intake through recommended dietary intake for Americans. They used the dietary guidelines for Americans 2015 to 2020. I think almost every country has this kind of things. And every consumption was separated by sex and age. Male adults, female adults, male children, and female children. Adults means 19 years of age or older. Recommended calorie intakes of for this group were used this amount, which male children, adults, male adults, female children, female adults, and water consumption roughly 15% of bottled water, 83% of table is for American average, and use already alcohol and inhalation, and the respiration rate they considered because they have to calculate. And data analysis, the number of microplastic consumed is concentration multiply daily consumption value of each item and multiply 365. Then we can get annual intake. And mean and variation derived from the study means because they just they didn't analyze the samples. They get the numbers, data from other papers. And tap water and sugar were comprised of the single studies and evaluations. And for this analysis, they assumed several things as follows. In all cases, the caution was taken to ensure conservative estimates were used, avoiding overestimation, assumption that all demographic groups consumed all food items, not like vegetarian, except children and alcohol. And the study focuses on recommended consumption. And I think I can understand because they have to estimate. Inhalation of microplastics is based on 2 studies survey. It was shown in the paper. I'm sorry I didn't mention where, but it was in the supplementary material. And discussion for microplastic concentrations, we can get particles per gram through the seafood 1.48, sugar 0.44, and honey 0.1, salt, alcohol. I showed already these numbers, and here the unit, the daily consumption, this amount. We already checked the figure, those of this, and daily consumption, this amount, and inhalation, this amount, and all together, it was in the table and the figure, this amount. This annual number is very high. Do you think very high or low? And the consumption's order, I already showed you, air, bottled water, and seafood. And the types, mostly fiber and fragment, and in the air and in the beer maybe, just the 2 types were shown. But in the seafood, we checked many sources, many types were shown. And the microplastic consumption through water changes considerably depending on which water they drink. Because 94 particles per liter for bottled water versus tap water, just 4 particles were found in 1 liter. They mentioned 22 times difference. And other discussions, the study does not consider the large number of microplastics that enter the human dietary system, digestive system, by simply settling onto food during meals or food preparation. It means where we eat, when we eat the food, we can ingest
extra
microplastics, and because they deal with food, so just think about food intake and food itself. Food itself, they show the number of microplastic particles, but we can additionally intake microplastics during the meal and food preparation. And this amount of microplastics could be ingested by humans per year from settling out of the atmosphere during evening meal alone. It's another paper. It's from the other paper, and the study were also not able to consider the ingestion of microplastics via the other food items: beef, poultry, dairy, grains, and vegetables. Many papers deal with the seafood because they think they were mostly contaminated.
Or the microplastic issue was from marine plastics.
The further limitation came from added sugar, because the paper they reviewed, they didn't use it no spectroscopy or thermal analysis. So it could be overestimation, because with FTIR or other instrument, we can remove false microplastics, but they didn't do it, so it may be overestimation. Air inhalation data came from only 2 studies. But from now on, I think we will get many papers, because many researchers from many areas, they dive into the microplastic researches. And depending on the seafood consumption, dietary risks against the microplastics vary. It means it's variable. The study's estimation was drastic underestimation, because I already mentioned in the abstract, because 50% of a person's calorie intake were considered. Any recommendations to reduce or avoid certain food groups to minimize microplastic exposure was not unfounded currently. And the potential pathways for harm for us, microplastics could release constituent monomers as well as additives and observed chemicals. And it can cause physiological harm ranging from oxidative stress to carcinogenic behavior. But we don't know where yet, but it could. Microplastics can penetrate the human body via cellular intake in the lungs or guts, as well as by paracellular transport in the gut. It's a difficult process to understand, I mean. And further researches are needed for other food resources, for grains and vegetables, other protein sources like beef or something like that, and chicken. They mentioned one paper, chicken. And the most effective way to reduce human consumption of microplastics is to reduce production and reduce of plastics. And they mentioned about bottled water, reduce use of bottled water. Thank you very much. Be careful from now on. Don't drink beer.
Thank you very much, 정수.
Questions, please.
Any questions or comments from Flora? 전부 이제 모두.
Yep.
Hi.
Okay.
Hi. Hi. I have a few questions. Hi. Good morning.
Morning, Widya. Apa kabar?
Oh, boleh mau nanya duluan, nggak apa-apa.
Nggak apa-apa.
No.
Nggak apa-apa. Okay.
No, Widya,
Ibu
you
mau nanya
first.
dulu?
No,
Okay,
no, no.
I will go first.
Are you guys saying hello to each other?
Yeah, we use Indonesian
Hello,
language.
Sani.
I'm sorry.
Okay, dear. Do you have any comments or question?
Actually, questions. Thank you, Jongsu, for your presentations. I have a few questions regarding this paper. First, this is just a logic question. For tap water, if you cook it first, does it have any effect to reduce the microplastics? Number two, microplastics on our body. Does it have any direct impact to our health? Is there any illness that will come out if we consume microplastic for several periods? Number three, do you get my first and second questions?
Okay.
Can I go on?
Yep, please.
Okay. Number three, if the impact is not direct, so how long until we can see the impact to our body health? Is it more than 10 years or more than 5 years? Number four, I'm just curious, what's the researcher in this paper use to see the microplastic? What kind of tools? Yeah, okay. Just those 4 questions that I'll have to ask.
Number 4 question. They didn't analyze the samples.
For the
They-
numbers, number 4.
Number 4, they reviewed papers already published. They get data from the other papers.
Oh, only secondary data? They don't see and measure it directly using any tools like microscope or anything?
Mm-hmm. It depends on the papers they review. And
But sometimes FTIR or
Lamas
Raman spectroscope
and ICMS.
were used for identifying microplastic in several different kinds of stuff.
And for
Okay, so microscope.
Yeah.
Microscope.
Microscope could be
Okay.
one of the tools.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and then for the number
2 and 3.
2 and 3.
it's very difficult because I think for as far as I know, we don't know yet the adverse effect. But as they mentioned, several papers investigated the adverse effect of microplastics. They mentioned smaller than 130 micrometer can translocate into the cell, but I think it takes a long time to show the direct impact of microplastics on our cell level. But I think from now on, many papers will be poured out from many researchers.
Yeah, I'm sure more and more researchers are getting interested in that issue you mentioned. So maybe sooner, maybe soon, we
And
get some evidence of the adverse impact of microplastics on human health. But I'll say for sure.
And they mentioned about the methodology. I already told you they reviewed, and in some papers was old, and they didn't use elegant instrument like FTIR or Raman spectroscope.
It depends on the
The instrument, but from now on,
technical skills and sophistication of our devices.
and devices is progressed very quickly and very well, and we can detect up to 20 micrometers in most microplastic laboratory, so we can understand well enough to show adverse effect soon, I think. Number one.
When you cook tap water, what happens? The microplastics in the water doesn't disappear when you cook, when you boil. It's a pollutant,
Oh,
so it still remains in the food. So we can
okay.
But I think the focus of this paper is the concentration of a microplastic in the bottled water is higher than tap water. So we should avoid using bottled water in terms of
Bottled water.
plastic.
It's very important and interesting because if we have this slogan,
Yeah,
we
you
can,
cannot
yeah,
have
yeah,
this to the consumers, the public.
we should avoid
But
bottled water because of this issue too. So it's
the
very
baseline is water quality. So to ensure the high water quality is very important to persuade people not to use bottled water.
Okay.
Okay. And any further questions or comments?
Hello.
No?
Yes, I have question.
Yeah. Lela?
Yeah. Annie, how are you? I don't see your face here. I'm wondering how plastic can occur or generate in tap water or honey and other any kind of food.
That's the question. I lost your question. Sorry.
Tell us again.
Would you say? Lela, would you say it again?
Yes.
You lost your question.
Yeah. I'm wondering how microplastics can occur or generate in any kind of food. Is that come out from the packaging or what? Because I only heard about microplastic, which is found in seafood, but through this journal, we know that microplastic also found in honey, sugar, tap water, something like that. From in the tap water, is that come out from the pipe, or how it can occur in the water and any kind of food?
The water from the environment, it can in many ways.
Yeah, from
The air, from the soil, and runoff water. It can go into the water, and finally, water. And honey too.
So we can understand that the microplastic research or survey was started from marine environment, but with more research in other environments like air and water, researchers find out that we are exposed to the ubiquitous microplastic environment. So the penetration from the air of a microplastic, is is high, and microplastics settle down the surface of the water, and it can sink down and floating in water column of fresh water and also tap water. And we are using many kinds of equipment made by plastic. It can be a source of microplastics.
Means we cannot avoid the consumption of plastics. So we thought the last suggestion reduce production of use of plastic.
For the practical purpose, you can reduce bottled water.
And disposable.
Yes. And from my side, I would like to say figure 2. Figure 2. Would you say show the figure 2 from the paper? Figure 2 shows different materials, different things. Show different level of microplastic pollution, especially airborne plastics are high. It could be some lack of evidences, because this paper had only 2 studies. If we have more and more evidences about microplastics from air, the range of this bar could be shortened. At the moment, we see airborne and seafood, bottled water are important source of microplastic in our daily diet, but it could be changed if we have more and more scientific papers.
Evidence.
So I hope you keep that in mind.
And indoor air and outdoor air, if the place is a bus terminal, it should be very high.
Yes, the variation is very, very high. So we have to keep it in mind. We need to be a little bit cautious when we do the data, deliver the message to the public.
And this paper gave me impression. Usually we think about food, just food or
Yes,
other things, but think about air. Because particles are very, very so many particles are in the air, and it comes from tires or other weird plastic. The very small particles go into the air. We shouldn't avoid it. We have to inhale the air. We avoid some food, but we can avoid the air.
The issue of the air pollution issue.
Yeah. So I think in the future, air pollution, microplastic pollution will be very, very
integrated.
hot issue.
Yep, that's very good lesson from this paper.
Maybe someday we need the standard for air pollution that there is a microplastic parameter, maybe.
Yeah, someday. Any further questions or comments?
Is it useful to use mask to avoid the microplastic? No?
I think we have
You usually mask made from plastics, so it could be a source of microplastics if we use plastic mask.
but made of
Oh,
cloth. We have
okay.
Natural content.
natural things. Natural cloth.
But we
interesting.
the
Interesting about alcohol. Alcohol.
Yes.
Why alcohol is there? Because usually we know that alcohol using glass or can,
But
Yes.
the process to make alcohol, they use water.
Oh.
I thought
Oh.
they use special water, not tap water. So, concentration of microplastic. In my opinion,
I see.
for good taste, they use the special water.
Yeah.
Mineral
Maybe.
water.
And
Mineral water.
for the grain,
Grain.
yeah, the original.
Good quality water.
One question again.
Sorry.
One question again.
Okay.
I'm wondering, in your opinion, as researcher, is that need to have some research, same research like that for Indonesia? Because this is based on U.S. dietary.
Yeah, it's just
Yeah,
for
that's
the people.
Is it important?
Yes, very important because every country show very different dietary items. So I think in Korea, Korean drink more and more bottled water than Americans. I guess I'm not sure, but I need to check the statistics on Korean.
Maybe
That it will be very helpful for Indonesian too.
Okay.
Authors referred that the Japanese people is the #1 seafood consumption country in this paper, but I think Korea is #1 in seafood consumption because nowadays more and more seafood are consumed by Korean people.
Korea?
Yeah, some statistics said that Korea is #1 country in seafood consumption per capita. So
Yeah. Okay. I eat seafood almost every week.
it's okay.
Danger, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
More questions from floor. Okay, thank you very much for joining us today, and we are going to hold the next seminar the first Tuesday of September. Same time. Let me check the calendar.
So September. 1st of September.
1st of September is our next schedule. Please joining us again. I'll see you next time. Yening?
Yes.
Would you choose one paper for the next seminar?
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Thank
See
you.
you next
Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you next one. Bye.